Hi, guys. Welcome to the chat. How are you? I hope you're doing well today. Let me know if you cannot hear me. So far, it looks like everything is moving great, and I see you guys signed in. Let me just go live on Instagram. So give me 1 second as I do that, and then we can go ahead and jump in. All right. How do I do this? Remove this destination. Okay, so I'm going to add Instagram. Just bear with me, guys. I hate that I have to do this because it takes a chunk out of the start, but we're going to make it work. All right, it looks like we are okay. I see you guys chatting. I'm also always glad that you guys get a chance to chat before I come on the live. I love to see you guys explaining things to each other and kind of opening up the conversation. Okay, now we are live on Instagram as well. I'm just adding, come join us. Okay. So, yeah, as long as you guys can hear and see me, it looks like we're okay. Hopefully, we don't have any tech issues. Let's jump in, okay? Before I start recognizing you guys and just saying hello to you and introducing you, let me just jump into why this topic. So, over the past month, I'm going to say a month, we've been talking a lot about personality development and psychological concepts that occur in families, such as, being easily angered. Tonight, we're going to talk about being easily offended and what that looks like in a family context that's dysfunctional. We have also focused on high conflict family members and relationships and what that entails. So I think the best way to kind of round out this topic that we've been on lately is by talking about the easily offended. And, I think we all could be easily offended at some point in our lives. We can also, be individuals who are kind of maybe I should put it this way: instead of saying our buttons are easily pushed, we are a little bit touchy. That's the word that I'm going to use. That it's normal for us as human beings to be a little bit touchy, right? Quote unquote touchy. But what tonight's live chat really is about is the family member or the person in the relationship where everything you try to do is wrong. Nothing you do is right. There's always some kind of offense being taken. You don't have any leeway. There's no grace or compassion being shown to you because all you know is that other individual is offended. And so, how do you deal with that? So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what makes the other individual, the family member, the person that you're in a relationship with, what makes them so easily offended? Is there something going on in the psyche? Is there something going on with self-esteem? Is there something going on in their heart, their soul? What is it that's causing this? So I'm going to highlight what psychology says. Now, let me also say too that being easily offended seems to be what's called a social or socio-cultural concept. What that means is that there's a social piece to the puzzle and there's a cultural piece to the puzzle, right? So there's a strong code of honor, for example, in families who have a Native American or an Indian background, who have a Hispanic or Latino background. There's a strong code of honor also in African American families, depending on what their beliefs are. Most Black families or African American families tend to be very religious. So that's their strong code of honor, right? So they hold this strong code of honor. Now, my other culture, which is Native American Apache, my grandfather's side of the family is the Native American Apache. They have a very strong code of honor as well. And their socio-cultural concept or honor is this: that you have to respect your elders, you are to grow and be strong and courageous, powerful. You're not to be minimized or shown up to be a coward or disgraced, right? There's a strong code of honor within the Native American heritage as well, and of course in other cultures. So there's a huge socio-cultural piece to the puzzle when we talk about being easily offended. It really, the whole socio-cultural concept really bases itself on how you perceive yourself, right? Who you say that you are. And when someone kind of opposes that, then you become easily offended. So there's a huge socio-cultural piece to the puzzle. It's also the state of being offended is also a complex emotional state, meaning that it's not always easy to pinpoint in the moment why you have become offended. So let's say, for example, you have a mother who's very narcissistic. She tends to be a covert narcissist, meaning that there is narcissistic tendencies, but under the surface, it's not really apparent with the eyes. And your mom may come across as very loving, dedicated, compassionate, mature, just everything you would want as a mom, right? But you know that not to be true. You know your mom to be selfish and immature and controlling and dominating and just belittling, right? So let's say that is your mother, right? If you say something to your mom, whether it comes out the way that your mother didn't like it, right? The way you said something offended your mom, or the way you may have said something made your mother feel guilty or convicted, whatever the situation may be. Let's say you've said something to your mom, now she is taking an offense to it, right? And so now there you are stuck trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? What did I say wrong? And your mom, for example, may be highly offended, right? To the point of telling you, get out of my house, leave. I don't want you here. You've offended me that much. Sorry, guys. I see my camera froze again. I'm so sorry. But let's say your mom is saying, get out of my house. I don't want to talk to you. You've offended me. Don't talk to me like that ever again, right? And so now you're in this state of confusion. I don't know what I did wrong, when I did, like, what happened here, right? So being easily offended is a complex emotional state. Your mom may not know in the moment why she's offended at you, but she's offended, and she's going to uphold that. And she may hold it against you for many, many years, what you've said to her. Lastly, before I go to the chat box and welcome you guys, there may be some gender differences also when it comes to being easily offended. I'm going to tell you what I've seen personally and clinically, but there's no research to really back this up. I'll try to post some things in the description box for you, but there may be some gender differences in terms of being offended. Males may be less offended by certain things than females. There has been at least a couple studies that has focused on emotional sensitivity in men versus women, and women tend to be a little bit more emotional and may also be a little bit more offended in some cases than men, right? So if you have a narcissistic mom, and let's say you have a dad that's kind of quote unquote normal, you may notice that your mom is very touchy with certain things, and you're not to say or do particular things in front of her, which is normal, right? But narcissistic mothers go a little overboard. You almost have to praise them, right? Get on your knees and praise them all the time. Walk that code really well, walk that line really well. So mom may be a little bit more offended by things than your dad, for example. Okay, so that's the gender differences. Let me jump into the chat box and welcome you guys and see what you're saying. I'm going to start out with Cat Sushi, hello and welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Sun and Sunflowers, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in the chat box. Cherry Jubilee and the Retro Woman 80. So glad to see you as well. Welcome. I also see Live Life, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. There's more people. Hello, Elizabeth. I'm sorry. I always forget to put you online on the screen here. So here you are. I'm sorry, guys. As I warm up, I'll get to where I need to be. It's been a long day. So welcome, Elizabeth. Glad to see you. I'm going to put you up here. Deb, I forgot to put you up earlier. Live Life, hello and welcome. Longevity Rituals, hello and welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, well, I'm exhausted from keeping my words in my mouth or yelling will ensue. I actually want to comment on that, longevity rituals. I'm going to try to come back to that a little bit later. Precious Jewel, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Nancy R, hello and welcome. Just welcoming some of you to the live chat. Uh-oh. Laughing Hulk, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Welcome. Laughing Hulk says, I got hooked on this channel after the first video that was suggested to me. That is so awesome. So glad to have you. Welcome. Welcome. That's so good. Thank you so much for that. Sound advice. I love that. Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Kyra knows 144. Hello and welcome to the chat. Nice to have you in tonight's live chat. I think I said hello to you, Cherry's Jubilee. At least I thought I did. If not, welcome to the chat, Cherry's Jubilee. I don't want to forget you. John Waller, hello and welcome. Glad to see you tonight. I usually have you in comments and not live, so really glad to see you. Okay, I'm looking for comments. Main house, hello. Welcome. Glad to have you. B, welcome. Glad to see you as well tonight. Napalm 1334. Hello. 1334 is usually how I say it. Welcome. Glad to see you as well. T Mac. Hello. Hello. Welcome. All right. There's a lot of you on here tonight. So glad to see all of you. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any comments that I can actually discuss here. Thank you so much for that, main house. I'm really glad to hear that. Hello. I've never seen you before. Welcome to the live chat. Glad to have you tonight. Very glad to have you. It looks like. Thanks so much. My mom said the same thing today. She said the same thing. Even though I'm over the age of 35, she still likes choosing my clothes. She's like, did I buy that for you? I'm like, yes, Mom, you bought that for me. Thank you so much, Live Life. That's nice of you. I'm going to read this one. So this is Elizabeth. She says, I think my neighbor is a textbook narcissist. Whatever I do, he just doesn't leave me alone. He says he doesn't like the way I talk to him, but he comes up to me and becomes offended. Yeah, isn't that interesting? I wouldn't be surprised if in some way he likes you, Elizabeth, and not in a romantic way. But I mean, maybe he just likes you as a person, even though he says differently. He's an interesting psychological experiment, if you ask me. Fina, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Love, laugh, live, Maggie, hello and welcome. Glad to see you on YouTube tonight. All right, I'm so looking for comments, and I keep finding people to say hello to. The diagnosis, oh my God, that screen name says it all. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you tonight. Felisa Lewis, I'm so glad you can make it to a live chat tonight. Glad to have you. You know what? Let me go grab my charger because I'm going to lose you. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. I'm sorry for that. Let me plug this in. The last thing I want to do is lose you guys. Okay. Okay, this is a live chat with Tamara. This is how it usually goes. Tech issues, charger issues, the list just goes on. Okay. Felisa Lewis, hello and welcome. I think I welcomed you, but welcome to the chat. Okay, the Bond girl. I don't remember seeing you before either, so welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. I am looking for comments. Oh my goodness. Renee Brittany, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Greetings to you too. Welcome. Glad to see you. Nobody, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Okay, so I'm not seeing too many comments, guys. Thank you so much for that, John Waller. That is awesome. Such a good comment. Thank you. I think Main House has a question too. We're gonna go to her question, his question. I think it's her question. And then I'm going to jump into telling you what's going on here. Okay, guys. So Main House says, do you think enmeshment has a big part in this? I do. I do. So let me kind of pull this apart a little bit. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term enmeshment, here's what it means. It means that you are so enmeshed. It typically happens within a family dynamic where the family is so interconnected. I mean, interconnected, that nobody really has self identity. No one really has their own emotions. They don't experience their own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as their own. They tend to have little to no privacy. They are very interconnected. Okay. So, enmeshment. Now, for a family where enmeshment is the foundation of the family problem, I think becoming easily offended can be connected to that. And here's why. Let's say, for example, you have a brother and you guys have been really close and, almost so close that you know all of his business and he knows all of your business. But let's say one day you say something to him to correct him or to change his behavior or to point out something that he's done wrong. Boom, there's being offended, right? You know him well, he knows you well, but now you're pointing out that he's done something that's wrong. He's likely to become offended and maybe more offended by you because of the significance, of the relationship. So some psychology research suggests that if the relationship to the other person who's in relation to you is really strong, so a sibling relationship, a husband, a wife, and they point out something, you can become easily offended by that because the relationship is significant. You're not going to become offended by some granny down the street who doesn't know you. You may become a little bit more offended with your sister who knows you really, really well and has decided to point out some wrong behavior. So I hope that makes sense. So main house, yes, you are correct. There can be a component of enmeshment here for sure. For sure. Okay. Let's jump into the content. I'll go back to the chat box in a little bit and look at all of your comments. Let me jump into what happens when an individual is offended. And we're not talking about just, I'm taking an offense to what you said. I'm talking about an individual who kind of goes to the extreme, right? Let's say you've said something to your cousin or your uncle or your aunt, and you guys typically have a really good relationship, but you say something and all of a sudden they are offended, easily offended. They go off the deep end. They totally block you on social media. They block your phone number. They want nothing to do with you. They start spreading rumors about you. They're all over social media saying negative things about you to different people. They're now starting to sabotage your relationships with other family members, right? So that is extreme. Okay, so let's say that is happening. That's the kind of being easily offended that I'm talking about. Being unable to tolerate something to the point of going way overboard, way overboard. These kinds of individuals are detrimental. They may also be high conflict, which is something we've been talking about lately, right, guys? High conflict individuals who trigger fights, they fight. They are used to confrontation. They are not afraid of confrontation. They may also be histrionic in some ways, meaning that they're very reactive and theatrical. Everybody in the whole world's going to know that they've been offended. These kinds of individuals may also have an underlying personality disorder like narcissism. Can you imagine offending a narcissist? We call that a narcissistic injury. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what you've said wrong. Let's say you're talking to your father. He's a narcissist. He's a covert narcissist. He appears one way on the outside, but underneath the surface, he's a totally different person. Maybe you're having a normal conversation with him one day, but you said one thing wrong, and that one thing changed not only his attitude and behavior towards you, but it changed the status of your relationship with him. So now your dad kind of keeps you out there. You're no longer as close to him as you used to be. And so maybe what you said, you may not have known you said, or you really didn't think it was a big thing that you said, and it doesn't have to be. But according to that narcissistic father, you've caused a narcissistic injury, and they're not going to like you for that. And so that's an easily offended individual. You don't know what you've said. and maybe you said something that you didn't think was bad, but that other individual did, and as a result they have gone off the deep end. you know Most of us can be offended and we get a little bit hurt and then we move on. But again, the kind of offended people that I'm talking about in this live chat tonight is way different, way different. They may even seek to destroy your life, your job, your reputation, your status, your self-esteem, your self-concept. They may seek to destroy all of that because you've hit one button that you didn't know you hit. And that's the scary part. Now, some research in psychology suggests that there are individuals with what they call PTBO, which is a proclivity. So it's almost like you're almost, what's the word I'm looking for? More likely to become offended. So it's called a proclivity to being offended. So there's been some research on that proclivity to be easily offended. And some of the research that we have is more about the workplace, unfortunately, and not about families and not about social relationships. It's about the workplace. And one research study, I'll put it in the description box for you after this live chat. One research study showed that 400 employees were studied, and these were individuals who self identified as having a proclivity to being easily offended. And these individuals were identified in the workplace to be troublemakers. They were identified in the workplace to be complex personalities. They were also identified in the workplace to be really poorly functioning employees. They had a high proclivity to being offended, and they couldn't function in the workplace as a result. There was a lot of task performance that was very poor. They just didn't do well in the workplace. Can you imagine having a family member who has a proclivity to being easily offended? It's going to be hard to talk to them, to engage them, to be around them, because you don't know what you may do or say that's going to set them off in the wrong way. So here's what psychology says is the cause for this. And I want to hear what you guys have to say in the chat box. Let me give you what psychology says is the cause for easily offended people. One thing is parents that modeled oversensitivity. Some research suggests that if you have a parent that is modeled oversensitivity or impulsivity or being overreactive, that it's easy for you to pick up on those behaviors. So maybe that mother that you have that's easily offended by all the things that you say and do, by the clothes you wear, by the attitude you have, whatever the personality you are. Maybe this mom who's overly offended by almost everything that has to do with who you are, maybe over the years, their parents, so your mother's parent, your grandparent, modeled being overly emotional. Sorry, guys, I see that my camera has frozen up again, and I have no idea why. Can you guys hear me, though? It looks like you can. I just don't know. Let me try to restart and see what happens, okay? Bear with me. Here we go. All right. Can you guys see me now? Let me know in the comment box if you can see me. I don't know what I did wrong, but hopefully, yeah, awesome. Cherry's Jubilee said, we heard you. Hopefully, you have seen me as well. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to jump back in. Okay, guys. Now it's a blank box. Can you see me though? Hopefully, you can see me. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, main house. Okay, awesome. Okay, we got it. I don't know what happened there, but anyhow, let me just jump back in. Okay, so, where did I leave off, guys? Parents who may have modeled an oversensitivity. Thank you guys for letting me know that you can see me. Wonderful. Okay. So there may be situations where a parent has modeled for your own parent oversensitivity to certain things. And over time, psychology says that, an individual can start to react to being offended very easily because of what's been modeled to them. Another thing that psychology has shown is the reason for being easily and overly offended is the discrepancy between a perception of themselves and the reality of who they are. So there's a discrepancy between the two. Psychology says that some people have one specific self concept, and if somebody comes along and kind of shows a different side, or somehow points out a side that's not very appealing, that individual can become overly offended. So an example of this might be, let's say your sister, we'll use an example of a sister. Let's say your sister is very narcissistic, very self-consumed, has always wanted the attention in the family, has always, competed with anybody that could be a threat to them. So your sister's very, very self-consumed. That's all about them. Okay. So let's say you go to your sister and say, you know what? You always thought you were the smart one. You always thought that you were the best one. You always thought that everybody liked you more, but that's not really true. You're really a very ugly person on the inside. Here's what you're doing. You're saying, here's your self concept, but here's how I see you. And so psychology says that when there's a discrepancy there, and that person can no longer see that good side of them, then they become easily offended. And then, you're now on their enemy list. You may not be able, psychology also highlights this, you may not be able to go back and correct that view. Once you call out that person and they become offended, that may be the last time you ever are heard from that person, because they may shut you out completely. So keep in mind, we're talking about extreme reactions, not just I'm offended by something you said. We're talking about extreme reactions. And sometimes with these kind of individuals, they stay in a complex emotional state all the time. And most of them tend to be high conflict, and most tend to be narcissistic, and most tend to have family trauma. So take that for what it's worth. This is going to be really difficult to kind of correct, because once you've offended, again, you've offended that very easily offended individual, you're not probably going to get back into their brain or in their life, because they're going to shut you out, or they're going to put up boundaries, or something's likely to happen. Okay. So psychology says, anytime there's a discrepancy between how they see themselves and how you see them, there's going to be a problem. Usually people who are overly sensitive and offended sometimes are very much disillusioned. They tend to be in a state of entitlement. And psychology backs this up. So I'll make sure that I post some of the research in the description box for you. But psychology highlights that sometimes these individuals are disillusioned. They tend to live in a fantasy world, and they tend to be rather entitled. And that comes from what we also call self-deception. You're deceiving yourself to believe that you're a certain way. And so when people have to address you, or, whenever something happens, that's where you start to see that other individual's weakness or vulnerability, or, they become just too offended and they go off the deep end. I once had a client, I'm going to say maybe 9 or 10 years ago, who was very much like this. And every time we would sit down to have a family session, anything that was said, she would take automatic offense. And it was so hard for me. It was so hard for me to just hear what the family members were saying to each other, because every single statement that was made, my client at the time would have to interject, or would have to cut that other family member off, or would say something that kind of confuses things, or would say something to derail focus and attention, because they were overly sensitive, overly offended and they didn't want to have to deal with accountability. So what do? You just throw off the entire session. I'm going to disagree with everything. I'm going to stomp and cry. I'm going to, scream my head off. I'm going to run out of this room. I'm going to threaten to run into the street. That's what happened. This client threatened to run into the street and get hit and killed by a car. Whatever this individual could think to do, they did to derail attention from the bigger issue, which is that she was overly sensitive and very, very easily offended. And again, we're talking about individuals who go to the extreme. So not only was this individual very theatrical and very, very self-consumed, but she was going to put on a show to derail all of the attention off of the problem, which is that nobody could talk to her, nobody could get through to her, nobody could have a relationship with her because she was constantly offended, and it was really difficult to deal with. Imagine that. And again, we're not talking about individuals who get offended on a daily basis because of things that are normal. We're talking about people who have made family life, relationships extraordinarily difficult because they cannot be talked to, they cannot be corrected, they cannot be shown up, they can't take responsibility, there's no accountability, they are offended. I'm sure you've had, before I go to the chat box, I'm sure you've had some individuals in your life where they ask for your advice, and then when you give them the advice that they're looking for, they get offended. Have you had somebody like that? They say, you know what, can I get your opinion on this? And when you give your opinion, now you're on the enemy list because you're not agreeing with them. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Okay, let me go to the chat box, guys. I apologize for the tech issues. I have no idea what happened earlier. The Truth Hurts. Hello and welcome to the track. Glad to have you tonight. Says, is it RSD? I'm not sure. Spell that out for me. The Truth Hurts. And I'm happy to comment on that. Let me know what you mean by that. Havana, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Welcome. Fairy Girl, hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat as well, despite the tech issues earlier. Mia K, hello and welcome. Says, my mom perceives someone looking her way. Let me go back over this. If my mom perceives someone looking her way, she immediately assumes they are staring at her and almost immediately starts aggressively staring at them. It was so embarrassing for me as a child. Yeah, absolutely, Mia. Because again, you've got maybe a mom who's really hypersensitive, and the first reaction is a fighting reaction, right? It's not the reaction of a normal person, a normal, quote unquote, a normal person, which would be, why is that person staring at me? Okay, whatever. And they go on about their life, right? Or your mom could have maybe took that to mean, I would probably look really nice to them today. Instead of that, the reaction was, let's fight, or what are you looking at? And then there's the confrontation. That's the kind of individual I'm talking about in tonight's live chat, Mia. Thank you for that, because that's exactly what we're talking about. The person who automatically goes to confrontation or offense without having any real proof, right? So yes, yeah, that's rough as a child. And I'm processing too in my mind as I'm looking at your comment that I have had clients in the past, they've come to therapy sessions and they've had to excuse their mom or dad from the session because mom or dad is getting offended. And that makes them feel like they can't open up. I've been in sessions like that with kids before. Yeah, it's really difficult. Napalm 1334 says, my brother is insane like this. He is so angry and will acknowledge that, but acts entitled to attack and abuse others. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If you say anything to him about cooling down, he will escalate and try to gaslight. Absolutely. Because technically the problem is this: a person who is overly offended has many reasons for being overly offended. And I'm going to give you guys some insights into what psychology says about this. But it's really hard for people who are easily offended to be corrected, because again, you're kind of going opposite of what they think. They think they're in the right, and for you to point out, calm down, you're getting too escalated, don't say that, don't do that. Now you're creating a discrepancy between how they see themselves and how you see them, and they can't tolerate that. Again, think of a narcissistic injury. A narcissist can't stand to be injured, because now you're telling them the very thing they don't want to hear, which is that something's wrong with them you know I think either tomorrow's going to be a video or a live chat. I don't know yet. But I do want to bring to the channel something that a lot of you may not have ever heard of, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So instead of it being OCD, it's OCPD. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And individuals who have this personality disorder are very OCD. You can't oppose them. You can't contrast them. You can't derail them from where they think they are right. Everything has to be perfect and on point. Nothing can derail them from where they are used to being. And so people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder can be very, very controlling and very hypersensitive to correction or any kind of derailment from what they think is the truth. So we may talk about that tomorrow, guys, either live or on a video, but I'll try to put some things in the description box for you just so you can learn more about it. But obsessive compulsive personality disorder can often be the cause of somebody becoming easily offended. Okay, so we'll talk more tomorrow. I don't want to give too much away. Yes, I don't know if you're talking to me, Precious Jewel, but I'm going to say, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Live Life says, yeah, some people will be offended by choice, and there is nothing you can do or say to change their mind, even when their offense doesn't make any sense. That's 100% correct. I very much agree. I'm going to give you guys another example just so you can get as many contextual examples as possible. I'm trying to give you a little bit of data here on what happens clinically. So I once had a client who was going to sue her father for something. And what she did was just, this was years ago, maybe I'm going to say maybe about 10 years ago. I no longer work with this individual, but dad did something to her while she was at work, and she sued him for emotional distress. And her idea was this, that, my dad came to my job, he made a scene, he made me look like a fool. Those are her words. He did this behind my back. He talked to my boss, then he talked to my coworker, and I don't like my dad coming to my job talking. This is what she told me during a session. And I said to her, I says, I very much agree with that. I understand you don't want your family members making you look a certain way or giving information to your coworkers. And, you would think that she would kind of grapple with that on the inside and move on. No, she didn't. She went straight to an attorney and she decided to have him served, and she tried to sue him for emotional distress on her job. And I really wished that Judge Judy could have tried that case, could have looked at that case, because it was complete nonsense. But you could not derail her from that train of thought. She was stuck there, and that's where she was going to remain. And she didn't win the first time she sued him, so she tried it again. She didn't win the second time, so she tried it again, and she still didn't win. But she was going to keep taking him back to court as many times as she could. And this is her dad, very, very self-consumed, very bent on getting him back for offending her. And that's the sad part. B says, I wonder what it would be like if everyone knew how to use their sociological imagination. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, B. Yeah, I'm not sure what that means. I don't know. B, help me understand that, if you will. Break that down for me. I'm happy to read that. It's not clicking for me. Yanni Body TV, hello and welcome. I'm glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Welcome. Yes, main house, I agree. There's so many names and terms and labels. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Very much agree. Um, Kiska Kuzatova. Whoa, I messed that up. I apologize. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. If I didn't welcome you, says you're describing my whole family, but they were also highly critical and very mean spirited. In other words, it was like a family. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Darvo. Let me close this. Whoops. Sorry, guys. I enlarged my screen. Do you guys know what Darvo is? Do you know what that is? I'm gonna tell you what that is here in just a second. Let me make sure that I have it correctly. It basically is a narcissistic kind of an experience where the narcissist uses Darvo against you, and that's deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. I'll put that information in the description box. I'm not going to open that door because that's just going to confuse things. But let me see here. Maybe I can post it in I'm going to post this in the chat box so you guys can take a look at it. Yeah, Fina says, what is Darvo? I'm going to post it right now. There we go. There's Darvo, guys. We'll talk about it at a later time. I'm not going to open that can of worms, but I totally see what you're saying. Where are you, Kiska? Did I mess that up? I lost you. All right, I'm getting back to Kiska. Here she is. She says they wanted to be verbally and emotionally abusive. Yeah, absolutely. Without being held accountable. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Why not? And usually, people who are very personally offended, they're oversensitive, they're high conflict, you're not going to hold them accountable because once you do, you are holding them to a standard that they themselves know is wrong, right? They know they've done wrong, but you're not going to be the one that's going to hold them to that. They're not going to take responsibility for their behaviors because at that point, they're now confirming that something is wrong. And most individuals who get really offended and they do things that are just way over the top, they don't want to be held accountable because, again, they're then seen as problematic. And that's the last thing that they want to see. Try telling somebody who is overly offended that they have done something 100% incorrect. They're going to get that much more offended, right? And sometimes they escalate in their emotions and then they want to do something to hurt you in some fashion. File a complaint, sue you, go to your boss, destroy your reputation, block you on social media. They want to do something to get you back or to get you in a state where they feel like they've got their foot on you. This is just who they are. This is how they behave. And again, we wouldn't call these individuals necessarily high conflict, but these people are easily offended. They're very hypersensitive, and that's a problem. Jason Z, hello, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Says, I told my mother how her abandonment of me and my sister, and she hates me for it. She never calls me, yet takes my sister on vacations. That's a complex family dynamic. There's a reason for that, Jason. I'm sorry that's happening to you. There's definitely a reason for that. Yanni Body TV says everything we say and do is the wrong thing. They're perpetually offended. Absolutely. Everything you say and do is an offense, right? I've seen this in therapy with families. I've seen this in my personal life. I've seen this with coworkers. And it's really hard sometimes to wrap your mind around how offended these individuals can become. And especially after they have maybe done something wrong on their end. When I used to work in a juvenile detention center, I used to have kids that I would see for therapy who not only burglarized homes but tried to set their own homes on fire. They would assault, they would fight every day, they would get suspended all the time. Some of my kiddos even got expelled. And sadly, there was nothing that I could say as their therapist to change how they viewed the situation, because if I would say something, they were going to be automatically offended, and they're the ones who did the act, right? They're supposed to be held accountable, but these very overly sensitive individuals, they can cause the issue, but they're not going to look at themselves. They don't have the capacity to do that. And sometimes that's because of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They can't see beyond themselves. They just can't. They're very self consumed. Welcome to the chat, Silent Walk. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. You missed all the tech issues at the beginning. Hi, Hang. Hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. T Mac says, I have a cousin who, did I welcome you, T Mac? If I didn't, forgive me. Welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Says, I have a cousin who is always in competition with me because of my lighter skin tone. Yeah, sometimes that's an issue. I've seen that so many times too. When I called him out for it, he avoided me and got the whole family to try to get me arrested at a family party. Oh my God. Okay, that is drama. That is drama. And there's some deep-seated issues there, T Mac. I'm sure you can agree with that. All right, guys, before I go back to the content here, because I want to give you some ideas of what intensifies the offense for the other person. What does psychology tell us is the reason for them getting so offended to the point of wanting to hurt you in return? But before we get there, let me just go through a couple more comments. I'm going to put this up here because Napalm 1334, mostly everybody that's on this channel is wonderful. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's wonderful. You guys are so supportive of each other. That's beautiful. So Shaolin Monk, I hope I said that correctly. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Yeah, thank you, Deb. Reaction sensitive dysphoria. Thank you so much for that. I've heard about that all the time. I hear about that all the time is what I'm trying to say. And I've heard about it over the past few years. And there's some issues. Thank you for that, Deb, by the way, for clarifying. There's some issues with this concept. However, there are some therapists who believe in RSD. And I'm going to say this is a little bit different from somebody who's easily offended. I would say reaction sensitive dysphoria is more of an issue that happens when a person has gone through a lot and they are very sensitive to certain things, but you're not going to hurt anybody else. You're not going to try to get somebody else's life, up in chaos. You're not going to try to create problems in another person's existence because you're offended. So I would say reaction sensitive dysphoria is more of a quote unquote condition that happens when you've dealt with a lot in your life and you've had trauma and you've had rejection and you've had deception in your world. The people that I am talking about tonight are, for lack of a clinical term, they are devils. They literally try to destroy you because they can't take responsibility for their own behaviors, for their own, role in certain things, or they can't stand the truth and they don't know how to have boundaries. So that's what I'm talking about. But thank you so much for bringing that up. And thank you, Deb, for clarifying that. I'm telling you guys, I'm bad with acronyms. Thank you. The truth hurts. Yep, I appreciate that. Emerald Jack 4200 says, welcome to the chat, by the way, says, I feel like my city is absolutely full of these people. Yeah. My recent trip to Washington, D.C., I felt like the entire city I was in was easily offended by something. Like, I have never seen people drive and behave so ferociously in my whole entire life. And I've been just about everywhere. But Washington, D.C., I don't know. I don't care for the drivers. All right, guys, let me give you what psychology says is the issue, okay? And then I'll go back to the chat box and we'll wrap up. So here's what psychology says. Psychology says that there is often a discrepancy between someone's self-concept and their vision of themselves. And so this is why some people become offended. There's a discrepancy between their self-concept and how other people see them. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say your dad has obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Everything has to be very well planned. Everything has to be planned to a T. Nothing can be out of line. And I mean absolutely nothing. Or he will have a meltdown. And we're talking crying, screaming, threatening, slamming things, expressing very intense emotions. Okay, so let's say this is the dad that you have. Dad sees himself as a very competent, emotionally mature person. But when you point out his tantrum, he may then become even more angry and escalate to a point of you not being able to calm him down because you've created, by telling him how you see the situation or him, you've created a discrepancy between his self concept and reality. And so now he has to second guess himself, and now he has to be humiliated by his immature reaction to things not going his way. And so psychology says one of the reasons why some people are easily offended is because you've created a discrepancy between their self-concept, who they think they are, versus the reality of who they are. Psychology also says that these individuals may have had voices in other areas of their lives, of their life, excuse me, growing up, that told them they were not important, they were not significant, they were not accepted, they were not liked. And so, you know, when you do something that easily offends somebody like this, or when you do something, I should say, that is offending someone who is oversensitive, you could be kind of, what's the word, causing them to go back in their emotional state and in their mind to a place where they were not accepted in the past. Does that make sense, guys? I feel like I just said blah 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 blah. Let me break this down a little bit. So, you know, let's say, for example, your dad never really was accepted as a child. He was bullied, he was threatened, he was ousted, the list goes on. You saying something to your dad may cause him to go back to that time in his mind. And so then he becomes overly offended that way. Does that make sense, guys? Keep in mind that being overly offended is a complex emotional state. And so sometimes the person goes through what psychology calls reenactments. They go back to a behavior or a time in their past that was very, 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 very difficult for them. I'll put it that way. So it's almost like a regression, an emotional regression. They just, somewhere in their mind and in their heart, they go back to a place in time that wasn't good for them. And that sometimes can cause that person to be very overly sensitive. There's also the issue of real versus imagined with these kind of individuals, right? You may do something to them not knowing that the individual may take offense because they kind of live in this fantasy world of disillusionment, you know, and you saying or doing something that has offended them then kind of wakes them up to reality, and they can't handle that. So there's a discrepancy between reality and fantasy for these people too. Sometimes they're in a world all on their own. It's their own world, and when you do something to them, you're now pulling them out of that fantasy world or that state of disillusionment, and they don't like it. Okay, so psychology says that that is also the issue sometimes. There's also social and cultural pressure, right? Sometimes people are offended because they want to protect themselves from social and cultural pressure. The idea of you need to be successful, you need to be liked, you need to be important, you need to hold a significant role in life, whatever the social and cultural pressure is. If you do something that causes that individual not to be able to see themselves as competent or significant, you've offended them. Okay, so psychology says that's an issue too. Something known as cognitive distortions gets in the way as well, guys. Cognitive distortions are kind of skewed ways that we look at things, all or none thinking, polarized thinking, right? Black or white thinking. I'm either good or I'm bad, you know? What's another one? Emotional reasoning. I feel small, so therefore I am small. That's another cognitive distortion that can get in the way. If you set a boundary, for example, with a family member, and that family member believes that they are insignificant, boom, there's an offense. You've put up a boundary. That family member thinks that they're already a small individual, in quotation marks, but when you set a boundary, you have now reinforced that they are quote unquote small people. They're insignificant. And so there's the offense. So psychology says cognitive distortions, distorted and skewed ways of thinking can also create that that offense. It can make the other person, excuse me, feel like you are easily offending them or you're offending them. Okay, let me make sure I'm giving you everything, guys. There's also one more thing I want to mention here. So, emotional and psychological need is often at the core of an individual becoming easily offended. Somewhere at the core of who they are very hypersensitive. They may feel insignificant. They may feel judged. They may feel like they don't have anything worthwhile. When you put up a boundary or you put them in check or you set something in stone, whatever the case may be, if they have a deep seated internal psychological and emotional need, you are likely to hit that part of them at some point. You may not know what that match is, but you've kind of created a fire with them. And so boom, there's the offense. And they may totally oust you for the rest of your life and their life as well. Okay. I think I gave you guys everything there. I think so. Yeah, I think I give you everything there. Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. Okay, guys. That's an overly sensitive person, a person who is highly offended, overly offended. They often have deep-seated needs that are psychological and emotional. They have not been dealt with. The individual is likely to almost wear their emotions on their sleeves at all times, but it's very abnormal. It's not an individual who gets offended by things most people get offended by. This is an individual who goes off the deep end because they feel offended. It's a huge, what's the word? It's a huge injury to them. And that injury can cause them to go after you, go after your reputation, go after, your rights, go after, your boss, maybe go to your boss and say some things against you, spread rumors, right? Put some things on social media. These kind of individuals are very high conflict most of the time. They are very angry individuals, and sometimes they are very, very emotionally unstable. This is how they are. This is how they function. All right, guys, let me go to the chat box and then we are going to wrap up. This was a rough one for me tonight, guys. And it's not you, it's not the topic. It's been a long day. So thank you for being patient. Liberty Can, hello and welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. I don't know about that one, Liberty Can. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that right now. I'll come back to you. I'm going to come back to you. Lisa Fowler, hello and welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, I asked my brother in law, was his sister going on the cruise with us? And he told her that I asked, and she's been mad ever since. This was 2010. Wow. Excuse me. Wow. Do you think maybe she took that to mean that you didn't want her to go? Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But individuals who get easily offended, again, they have something on the inside. So maybe you asking took her back to a place where she was rejected in the past. Or maybe you asking caused her to wonder if you like her or not. I don't know. But something happened there. Some kind of quote unquote injury was created there. The sad and scary part, though, guys, about people who are way too offended when they shouldn't be, is that you never know what that button's going to be, and that's a very unpredictable relationship. How do I know what not to say and what to say if everything just about that is said to you creates an offense? How do I get around this, right? And it's not a you problem, it's a them problem, right? That's good to know, Shaolin Monk. That's really good to know. Shaolin Monk says, I always like to learn something new. Yeah, that's good. Me too. And let me just say, too, guys, I'm learning still as a therapist with 15 years experience. I'm still learning how to deal with these people because sometimes I'll come across it in society. Sometimes I'll come across it in my office. And sometimes, I just sit there and I'm like, ooh, I don't know which way to go with you because not only are you easily offended, but you have a very strong constitution that says you are not wrong. And so how do you maneuver people like that, right? You think you're right, and if I tell you you're wrong, you're still going to think you're right. How do I maneuver this? And so even myself, I'm still learning how to manage that and deal with that with my own life, my own jobs, seeing clients in different areas, maybe going to schools when I go to schools and teach. Wherever I'm at, I see people who are easily offended and I'm thinking, how do we get around this? Sometimes there's no way to get around it. You're going to be the problem for that individual no matter what. Live Life did say that earlier. Emerald Jack 4200 says, what do you suggest some to do if they feel like they're being followed or harassed by people like this? Well, the first thing I would suggest is make sure that you have concrete evidence, and you want to make sure that you can kind of create a storyline, gather all the evidence of what's happening, and keep it on record in quotation marks, because again, these kind of individuals who fly off the deep end just because they feel like they've been wronged, they tend to be very high conflict. And so these people are going to say something that's going to get them in trouble. They're going to do something that's going to show them up to be foolish, or they're going to get themselves in some kind of legal problem because a lot of them don't know how to pump the brakes and put up the boundary. So I would keep a record. Keep a record. That would be my suggestion there. Try if you can. It's not easy, but try to keep a record. Nunya, I'm probably saying that wrong. Nunya Business. I'm going to say that. Hello and welcome to the chat. I apologize for that, but I'm glad to have you. Not sure I even understand that comment, Nunya. Let me see. Title of parent or mother. I like that. So it's clicking. So having a title of parent or mother or father doesn't allow them to abuse you. Right. Yeah. If it's your mom, your dad, guardian, whatever, the title in and of itself doesn't give them the right to abuse you. I very much agree with that. Yeah. Very much agree with that. Okay, I'm still looking for comments, guys. Bear with me, then we're going to log off. I'm going to go back to Lisa Fowler. She says, my husband and I, I'm going to say, went on vacation to a beach house with his family, and we made it there first, and his brother was so mad, he stayed out in the car for 4 hours when he finally arrived. I wonder what that was all about. Yeah. I mean, I would need more information, but just based on that, that's a little over the top. That's a little over the top. If you come face to face with an individual who seems overly offended and there's really nothing for them to be offended by, you have to pause and ask yourself, what's going on here? And I think it's healthy to pause and ask yourself, did I do something? If I were them, would I react this way? And if not, why? And is this too much for the situation? Is this reaction disproportionate to the trigger? That's what you want to always ask yourself. Is this way over the top? Because sometimes it may not be, and sometimes it may be. So I think it's wise to just ask yourself, when you come up against somebody like this, is this disproportionate to the trigger? And if it is, why? Right? Live Life says, I feel like people who are easily offended have a fragile sense of self and they flip out whenever your views, don't align with their exaggerated self-image. 100% very much agree, backed by science and backed by psychology. Thank you for that, Live Life. I agree. And that is often the issue, right? Again, it's that discrepancy that's caused between their self-image and the reality of things. If they see themselves a certain way and reality is not matching them, then yes, they're going to get automatically offended, and it's going to be a huge reaction. We're not talking feeling humiliated. We're not talking feeling a little bit embarrassed. We're talking, I'm going to destroy your reputation because I feel you've offended me. These are the individuals who go into grocery stores, flip out with the manager, have a whole argument in front of the entire store, and then demand an apology. That's what we're talking about here. These kind of individuals. They're very, very, very entitled. Oh, geez, that's a hard one. MNL Odell, hello and welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. Says some people are just angry and looking for a person to be mad at 100%. And that is something you should probably keep in the back of your mind. All of you who are on this live chat tonight, keep that in the back of your mind. And thank you for that, because this is wise to keep in mind that some people are mad and they just want to be mad at somebody. And maybe you're the person for the time being. Keep in mind, and I've had to learn this over the last 15 years of my career, that sometimes these individuals will pick a fight, have a reason to get angry, and then hold that grudge for a very, very long time. And there's no real legitimacy behind their emotion, but they're gonna be angry because that's where they want to be at that time. I'm sorry, Silent Walk. I'm sorry. Do the replay. Do the replay. If I'm understanding your comment correctly, I hope I am. Brian Koikadel, hopefully I said that correctly. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. Says, enjoy your videos. Thank you. You're welcome. And thank you for that. I'm so glad. Yeah, yes. John Tracy, hello and welcome to the live chat tonight. We're going to sign off in just a little bit. Glad to have you. And thank you for mentioning that. I agree. I agree. Sun and Sunflower says relatives invite me to gatherings, baby showers, anniversaries that require a gift. Gets angry because I no longer want to be invited, for them to be angry later for something trivial right after. Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. You're removing yourself from a toxic situation. Sorry, I can't be here for you. With people who are easily offended, and Sun and Sunflowers, I hope this is helpful for me to say, you do want to be able to set a boundary and say, you know what, we're family or we're friends or we're in a relationship, but that doesn't mean that I'm always going to do what you're asking of me. And I don't really have to care if it offends you, right? I'm going to love you, maybe I'm going to show you respect, but that's all I can do. I can't go the extra mile. Individuals with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, they expect you to adjust to them. Adjust what you say, adjust how you say it, adjust when you say it. They're just going to force you to adjust in some fashion because they can't stand for things not to go their way. And so, with people like this, you almost have to have an attitude that says, "I can go, but so far," and then that is as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to go any further to please you. Fina's in shock. Renee Baritane says, it seems as if the type of people you're describing are deeply committed to their trauma. Well, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, maybe so. And using it as a reason to remain deeply committed to misunderstanding others around them. That is such an awesome comment. And I think there are people like that. Uh, and that might be a very, very good way to put that. You know, these are individuals who are quote unquote committed to being in the emotional state that they are in. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. That was wonderfully said. Yeah. Yeah, the narc prayer, the narcissist prayer. If you Google that, guys, uh, I think it can be highly relatable to you. The narcissist's prayer. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pull it up right now. And I will leave a link in the chat box. So those of you who are on this live chat, take a look in the chat box. Here it is. I'm going to post it right now. There you go. There's the link, guys. The narcissist prayer. Somebody mentioned it. Here you go. Fina. It's in the chat box. Okay, before we sign off, I want to make sure I haven't missed any of you. Yes, main house. Absolutely. Paul to Sun. Hopefully I said that correctly. Hello. How are you tonight? Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. Ooh. Okay. I'm not following. So I'm gonna Mm, I'm not sure I understand that one. Create BJE. I'm sorry. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding that one. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Derek Rose, hello and welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Says, you and your channel are saving my life and securing my future. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that. That's so humbling. I'm really glad to hear that. That's wonderful and glad to have you on the channel. Okay, I'm gonna put this user in timeout because I'm not really liking what I'm seeing. Sorry, guys. I don't like putting people in timeout, but sometimes I'm like, no, your comments are not helpful. Crystallizing, is that correct? I don't know. I'm so sorry. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. We're gonna sign off here in a little bit. Yeah, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Absolutely. All right, guys. I think I got everyone. I hope I did. Yeah, absolutely. Main house. Yep. Oh, okay. Let me answer this one. Shaolin Monk says, do you study a class about multiple personality disorder and bipolar disorder? Because I'm studying a little bit about it. I don't know too much. Maybe you have a class on it. I don't know. Now, usually, let me see. Do you study a class about multiple personality disorder and bipolar disorder? Because I'm studying a little bit about it. I don't know too much. Maybe you have a class on it. I don't have a video. I do have a video on what's called, it was previously multiple personality disorder. It's called now dissociative identity disorder. I do have some videos on that. I can post that in the description box if you want to check out my videos. Um, that's all I can say about that comment, Shaolin Monk. I hope I'm on point there. I don't know. I'm going to read this one. Fairy Girl, journal your reality future. Yeah. You will pat you on the back for making it through and growing despite people kicking you while you were down. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I do have my clients as a coping skill journal their future, right? Where do you want to be? And sometimes that can be very, very helpful. I like that. Thank you for that, Fairy Girl. Okay, guys, I think I got all the comments tonight. There's always more. Let's pause here, okay, guys? Let me know in the comment section or the chat box if you want me to talk about obsessive compulsive personality disorder live tomorrow. I'm sure you guys know some controlling people, and I'm not talking just controlling people who like to control certain things. I'm talking about individuals who are so controlling that you feel suffocated, that you feel controlled. There's absolutely no room for you to breathe because these individuals need control. So let me know in the comment section, the chat box, if you want me to come back tomorrow with that. I'm happy to do that. In the meantime, guys, I hope you have a wonderful Friday. Thank you for being patient with the tech issues. YouTube will make the live chat box available to all of you to see over the next 12 hours. Why they do that, I don't know. But you should be able to see all the comments from tonight's live chat tomorrow. All right, guys, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.